Good evening, everyone. Hi, welcome to World Changers in Tech, our FemTech event. I want to welcome all of you for coming, especially in regards to what's happening right now and the really horrible weather. So I'm really happy that you braved all that and you made it here. And also followed my description. And by the way, if you're here by bike, if anyone's parked in the front, you might have to go around later to get your bike. But I think we got everyone that's via bike, right? So if you have any questions, you can go to the back and ask Susanna or Maria where to put your bike, just in case. So let's start off with, generally speaking, Happy International Women's Day +2, and everyone else that supports Women's Day Yay. For that, we wanted to have this special event, World Changers in Tech, based on female tech, and what that means in terms of health and well-being and gender equality. And to tell you a little bit more about what GERMANTECH does, we basically believe in the effects of entrepreneurship having a positive effect on society and the environment that we live in. And so what we like to do under our motto is we like to build, inspire, and push people forward for a more sustainable future. And that's why we like to have this platform series, so we can showcase to you the different type of technologies and entrepreneurship and solutions there are in order to make the world a better place. And before we go on to our wonderful panel, big hand of applause for everybody. I'm just going to jump over here really quick. Because it's really important for us to be as sustainable as we can. Here's our Wi-Fi password, and here's a LinkedIn, because we want to offset your CO2 emissions on how you got here. So if you go to the link and you answer 2 questions for us, we can offset those emissions, and we will be happy to share some of the information after the event if everything goes well, because then we'll have a little bit of data, and we can tell you who can be a bike, or maybe with U-Bahn, or no one came by car, I don't think, I don't know. We'll see. So I have to take a breather, I'm sorry, I tend to get really excited and then I talk a little bit too fast. My name is Anna Yukiko Bickenbach, and I'm the event and program manager, and I get to moderate this great panel with these very wonderful and strong women that we have with us. We have Danielle with us from Menstrual, the Menstrual Health Hub, and we have Harikana from Super Izzy and Fabiola from Also Investments. So thank you guys for coming out. And I think we should start with, generally speaking, well, actually I have to take one step back. Let's go to the audience first, because we can get some insights to the audience. How many of you are new to FemTech? Raise your hand. Oh, great. Okay. How many of you have used FemTech before, to your own definition? What do you think it is? Okay. And how many actually work in FemTech? Higher. So that's going to be the expert questions that will probably come at the end. So just to run you also through the panel, I want to make sure that we're able to pick everyone up on the subject of FemTech. So the first part of the panel is going to be defining the subject. What does the landscape look like? Then we'll go into, because we do talk about entrepreneurship as well, is to hear about the stories of entrepreneurship. What does it mean to be a FemTech founder, as well as Fabiola, coming from an investment perspective, can maybe tell us more about that space, like what's happening in the space, what do the investments look like, or maybe what are the trends. We'll get into that later. And then the last part is going to be, as I said, the trends that we can like forecast and see, what are the things you think are going to happen in the next coming years, kind of foreseeing the future of FemTech. And then we'll move into the Q&A. We have 45 minutes for the whole panel, so we want to make sure we go through these different stages, and then we can do the Q&A, and afterwards we'll have some networking with drinks that are sponsored by us. So now we can get to you lovely ladies. Tell us, like, one by one, a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and what FemTech means to you.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Keiser, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of the Menstrual Health Hub, which is a 2-part organization. One side is a nonprofit and the other side is a consulting services. we use the menstrual cycle as the entry point to being able to more meaningfully address female health across the life cycle. And we do this on a collective impact side, so we work with the public sector and really help grow the global menstrual movement. And on the other side, we consult corporate startups, anyone who's really interested in understanding how they can use this in their product development, marketing, communications, etc. And then I wear a third hat where I'm consulting for UNICEF around menstrual health and hygiene innovation, focusing on accelerating businesses and social enterprises in East Africa. So that's a little bit about me. I know way too much about periods and menstrual health around the world, so if you have any questions or you're working in this space, I would love to talk to you afterwards. Which is how I know. What is FemTech to me? So I think FemTech is anything that is at the intersection of technology and women's health. And a lot of the time it's very confusing because a lot of people think that just because a woman is working in tech, they're doing FemTech, and I think it's important that the health and wellness aspect is kind of locked in there. When I think of FemTech, I think about wearables, I think of apps, I think of products, I think of devices. Yeah, like I think it's important when we talk about health that we're also including not just reproductive health, because a woman is not just her breasts and her ovaries and her vagina and her vulva, but non-communicable diseases like osteoporosis and diabetes and those diseases that unfairly affect that half of the population. So.
I was going to say, Heine, if you have anything more to add to the definition, because it was pretty broad and pretty good.
Yeah, my name is Heine Kaheya. I am the founder and CEO of Super Easy AI. Super Easy AI is a conversational engine around female health. It started out as a simple chatbot on Messenger with period tracking, and it became to an educational platform. Now we offer content on female health, on menstruation of course, and on diseases like endometriosis, PCOS as well. It's been running mostly on the US and the UK market. We had a few German users as well, but we are an English product and our market scope is there. And I do have a medical background. So before I came to work on technology products, I've been involved in medicine. I'm a doctor. And I have been researching some female health issues in gynecology. And for me, FemTech means not only what you described, Danielle. For me, it means a little bit more from a medical perspective and from a diagnostic perspective as well. So as a doctor and as a patient as well, I've seen so many times and experienced so many times how symptoms are being ignored and how health situations, not necessarily illnesses, are being ignored, or sometimes treatment is being declined. So for me, it has an extra aspect from a diagnostic perspective, and my focus is, or purpose, to really to make medicine and get something out of the consumer female health tech as well.
Hello, my name is Fabiola. It's great to be here. I've always worked on the investor side. Very untypically, straight after university, I started working for a private equity fund, and I did that for 13 years. So different stage of company development. I then, in parallel, I always try to support social entrepreneurs and worked with different organizations on that, and in 2014 started investing as a business angel on my own, and in I feel very lucky in that beginning of last year I actually met two partners who, Keiser and Bettina, and the three of us founded AUXO, and so AUXO is still relatively new. At present we started off as an active angel club. We've done 11 investments since May. But we're not actually a fund, so just to clarify that, but we are in the process of starting fundraising to then have a bigger fund. And when we initially met, we talked about and I think there's quite a lot of talk about that in Berlin now, luckily, is the percentage of female founders, and that we still feel that there's work to be done. And the other thing is that on the investor side, you also get very few women, and depending on what statistics you look, the number in Germany is always that in the whole VC area you have 2% women. And so if we assume that investors, like everybody else, has a so-called similarity bias when looking at topics, sort of our thesis was that an investor, he underestimates topics related to women, where women are customers or decision makers or female founders, which the statistics also show. And that was the thing that drove us to found AUXO, to say that we want to channel money into underfunded topics and underfunded founders. And so obviously FemTech is a segment that's extremely relevant for us. And I think when we founded AUXO, yes, we saw, I think the founders that came to us without us doing the outreach is actually female founders from the FemTech sector. So, and with regards to your second question, definition, I totally agree with you. I think definition was very broad, so I don't have anything to add, but just to emphasize that we also feel that particularly in Germany, FemTech at the moment is kind of, to put it a little bit provocatively, is reduced to reproductive health, topics related to cycle, etc. And that we are very excited about broadening that and saying health-related topics in a more broader sense. And I know we're talking about the future of FemTech, but I think that's some of the business models we look at, and I'm very excited about going into that area. Yes.
And you also mentioned a very important part is how inclusive is a topic, which we also discussed before the panel would start, where we will address this towards more at the end of the panel, like what does it actually mean to be female in FemTech, and maybe wanting to have the funds in order to, if it's a very male-dominated world, etc., or when it comes to health and diagnosis, how many topics have been research around actual female needs and wants and what they need. Just to go back to the definition, not just the FemTech, because it can be so broad. So for me, 2012, I saw Ida, I guess, on stage the first time. She talked about the Clue app. Since then, I've used like a Ruby cup, and I've become a mother, and when I was researching this, I also wasn't aware of the whole cycle of what FemTech could mean. Just from a biological, physiological standpoint, could you guys give us maybe more of a definition when it comes to female health and tech? That it's not just only, as you say, the bikini area. I guess that's a term that's also being used, right? Can one of you enlighten us in terms of the other spectrums that there are?
Well, when we... Is this working?
You can use this one.
When we classify different innovations in female health, we look at them under 6 areas. Tracking is, of course, really important. If any of us are using a menstrual cycle tracker, that's something that we do. Diagnostics and testing, as you were talking about, prevention, treatment, management, and then information delivery. So as long as they are fitting under one of these, I think it's safe to say that it's technology. There's always this debate of whether period panties or menstrual cups are FemTech, and it's tough, right? It depends on which market you're looking at. Were those things there before? How much longer are they available? And I think for the purposes of this conversation, I think there has to be some type of technological application. Otherwise, it's just an innovation.
Right. And maybe, Heina, you can, because you also recently became a mother, are you familiar with these kind of products for consumers that are geared towards mothers and post?
You mean products around motherhood and
yeah,
pregnancy?
because I really like the audience to get more of a feel of these different aspects of technologies that are actually out there, because for me it was even overwhelming. It wasn't overwhelming, but I met with Danielle and we had a talk, and that's when I realized, like, oh wow, there's all these different angles to it. So I just want to make sure that we give you guys kind of the ground base of what is covered in it.
Yeah, well, I think it's always good to start with a cycle, and then it's a sort of natural step. I would say, taking a look at women's life cycles and journeys, to always talk a little bit about pregnancy coaching, and motherhood itself. Of course, it has a very specific and important health aspect, and there are technologies supporting those aspects, like pumps, for example, or different coaching apps. I think those are necessary and great. However, some of those are very, very recent, so like breast pumps are really just getting some innovation in the past few years, 2-3 years, though it's something that we use them very often. But on the other hand, practically every disease or really life situation, again, I don't really like to use always illnesses when we're talking about female health, has some specific health aspects, and Danielle mentioned osteoporosis. We can talk about PCOS, we can talk about diabetes, we can talk about just a simple exercise and workout research that has been done on men, and it's not really being done on women for the female body. So we sort of have these data gaps and biases around most specifics really in life, and the health tech is just one part of that. The products that support the cycle and female reproduction are just one part of that, but I think we really should go beyond that and take a look at health tech products from a populational perspective and see that these are actually women, not just men, who are using this, and those have different needs, different lives, and different needs for products as well at the end.
I think when we look at these statistics too, Fabiola, probably when doing like a financial analysis or an investment perspective, it's obviously clear the populations are 50% female, and that's why the numbers for the future look very bright. 51, yeah.
51 women.
Maybe I can, just from an investor's perspective, because the topics we've seen, because I think all three of us are saying that we'd actually like a broader definition of FemTech somehow. And as a sort of investor in Germany, I can cluster the topics. It's we've seen a lot on menstrual cycle, fertility increasingly. There's luckily more topics in menopause, so I'm sitting here, exactly. There's, I mentioned fertility, then there's a lot of companies which are pitching, for example, tampons in different ways, disposable, biological, whatever. It's sort of more product-based, and they call themselves FemTech. We have, exactly. Sort of the question is what does the technology part have to be like, and then there's very little on all the sort of from the topics we've seen from inside Germany, little on, for example, in the States, there are exciting companies about how to identify breast cancer earlier, wearables which are actually gathering data with regards to illnesses. So, but so far, at least from within Germany, we've seen little of those.
And that's why I think it's very important to have, it depends on your point of view. I think how you always define something, and that's why I think it's great that even in a panel you have diversity, because everyone's going to have a different view, and the whole point was us to kind of discuss and have an understanding of that, and I think that's really great. Maybe let's also go back to what made you guys go into the space, and for me, well, from my perspective for you two is, why did you go into space? What is your reason for that? And then we can, because I want to move into kind of also the gender equality, because I think when we do this because we want to have an impact. It's so we can start with Fabiola, maybe go down, or as you wish.
So why we went into the space, or as I said, as an investor, you always think you want to find areas where you can create attractive returns in the end and impact, and depending on where you stand. If you're more of an impact investor, obviously those criteria are more important. If you're traditional VC, you're looking at financial KPIs mostly. I think we felt the FemTech is such an exciting area because you can have both. It's underfunded, so you can achieve a lot of impact and still have very attractive returns. And we also felt that we can help entrepreneurs who are having trouble explaining what they do to the typical male investor. We know what they're talking about and believe that we can see the potential in business models quicker. So hope to be an active sparring partner, and it's very straightforward to go into FemTech.
It's a big part of empathy, right? Like empathy can create so much more, not inclusion, but if you can empathize with the person in front of you and understand what it means to have a cycle or a grandmother going through osteoporosis, etc., then it's much easier to have that conversation.
For me, it wasn't a business decision at all. For me, it was deeply personal. I think it started around when I was 15 and said first sex and didn't know who to ask. And then I went to medical university, still didn't really got a clue about things. And then years passed and I started to teach about sexual wellness, pregnancy, and female health in grammar schools and elementary schools, so that there was a huge amount of people I've talked to and about sexual health and female health, and then it translated into technology later on. So now looking back, I end up seeing that I have been working with female health, with or without technologies, 10-15 years, which is a lot, but it's deeply personal. This is how I became an entrepreneur. And it's good that it's actually good business as well. Thank God it's good business as well. But we still a lot to do there. So that's my story.
My story, I started working in like a behavior change communications context. I was working for a Berlin-based social impact organization called Wash United. And we started Menstrual Hygiene Day, which is celebrated on the 28th of May every year. So get ready to party. And it was in this context that I really was thinking, wow, like menstrual hygiene, like I never really had to think about this before because I grew up in a place where I pretty much had everything that I needed. If I had my period, I would go to the grocery store and get what I needed. But it was really through working on this issue in putting out campaigns to India, East Africa, and other areas where there is not the complete security of knowing that you're going to go to a bathroom that's locked, that's lit, that there's a toilet there that functions, that there's a dustbin, that there's even that you're going to be able to find a pad or anything to manage your flow. That I really kind of found my feminism and also realized like this isn't just an issue that's happening to like those girls over there. This is actually something that's happened to me a few times in my life, and actually this is a global issue. So I kind of took a step back and realized it's not just about menstrual hygiene and this lack of water, sanitation, and hygiene, but menstrual health more generally. And so my interest in FemTech, to come back to your original question, is really zooming out and seeing that there's so many different people that are working across menstrual health, whether they're people working in UNICEF on making better toilets, or Clue making a menstrual cycle app, or small little educational NGOs in Rwanda that are teaching about the difference between the vulva and the vagina and really crossing some taboos there. Everyone's kind of working in this same space, and what I like to do and what I feel best at is connecting them and making people feel less alone and creating collaboration opportunities between them. So FemTech has become a really big part of what we do because we focus on research, education, policy, and innovation. And we've just been kind of tracking all the innovations that have emerged around menstrual health at first, but then now moving into all these different areas across the female life cycle.
And that's one thing I also appreciated looking at your webpage is the map that you actually have, so you're able to see what's happening in the different countries. And I want to stay with the impact part and go into this gender equality, the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal 5, is how does FemTech, you can do an example, or name an example if you like, how does it empower women? May it be in a developing country or a developed country here, and maybe because I know you have probably a lot of examples, because you're working with UNICEF, right? And maybe as Danielle is telling us one story, maybe there's one or two stories you guys can relate to in terms of how does it actually empower or help facilitate gender equality?
I have just one example of a product that I think, I know I was talking about how menstrual cups and period panties may not be seen as innovative, but within the Duke UNICEF Accelerator Program, there's this one amazing organization called Sacodé, and they've created a reusable menstrual pad that ties on the corners, kind of like a string bikini. And this is by no means innovative or using technology, but a lot of the women in the villages there don't use underwear. So this is actually a really innovative solution to being able to manage their periods, that they just kind of put two strings in, the back and the front, and you tie it on the side. So yeah, this is something that can greatly impact a woman or a girl's life, because normally if they don't even have a concept of underwear, the periods become dually a problem, right? It's really about staying put. And so yeah, I think the technology is really context dependent.
I have just very, very shortly. In general, I think that FemTech could help regarding data inclusion. So the thing that we actually have something to track our cycles with, that actually can track our pregnancies with, etc., etc. It actually helps a lot to close the data, the gender gap that we're having now in technology and in research and science. So that's, I think, is going to be huge and has a huge impact towards inclusion.
Yes, I have two thoughts. One, also, I think the exciting bit is in developing countries, where the tech bit of the FemTech makes you also reducing cost barriers. For example, if you have telemedicine for particular services for women, women in rural areas who, via an app, can detect if something's wrong with them. There are many exciting things out there. And the other thing, again, is sort of I think more in here in Germany is going into gender medicine, really, that you have that a lot of the medicine, if you look at, for example, vaccines, it's adapted to the typical weight, to the weight of a typical or average male. A lot of in the Charité now has a seat for gender medicine, and if you read up on the examples, they have actually medicine for a particular heart condition. I think that was the big scandal a few years ago, that it's actually, it's good for men, but it kills women, and putting it slightly drastically. So there's an increasing number of examples, and so getting medicine to include to have the female perspective coming away from male medicine. And so in a way, I think it's a big, it's an argument about the term FemTech. Do we actually want it? Because at the moment it puts us in a subcategory. I think it's helpful because it helps us to talk to male investors about it. But I think in the end we should come away from it again, because it's not a subcategory. The whole health system needs to include the female perspective. And
is there any opposition to that statement at all? Just to have a disappointed discussion?
Definitely not. I mean, the one thing I was going to add to that is, I don't want to get into a birth control conversation, but the fact that birth control is made for women to take to prevent pregnancy and give liberation. If we look at thyroid medication, and when people have to take it for their hormones, they're weighed and given the right amount based on their BMIs. With birth control, you could be like 150 kilos or 70 kilos and you're still administered the same amount. So we still have a long way to go in terms of actually adapting medicine and technology to women, even though the product is for them in the beginning.
So it's probably made the thought of like moving forward, we're still FemTech, and in the future when everyone's included, just like any other topic, it becomes so normalized that we don't have to kind of, you know, point the finger at the terminology anymore. Did you want to add anything else?
No.
But I wanted to go into, you had mentioned like data, right? And let's, you know, be real, we're in Germany. One of the reasons why, you know, GERMANTECH is very fond of having this very academic and educational platform is because we want to showcase that technology doesn't have to be evil. I mean, there are certain parts of the German culture that, you know, does question, or what's the right word, questions what's happening, and they don't want, you know, data everywhere. But I want to stick with that for a second to kind of understand what do you guys think has happened in the landscape in the last few years since you've been in the FemTech space? Like, what have you seen? And maybe we can go into that data point as well. If you feel like, is it getting better or not?
Well, we're definitely having more products and more women using these products, so we're getting more data, that's for sure. How we design those products to make sure that they, even if they're FemTech, sometimes they just don't have female executives on it. Very great and well-known example for this was the Apple House product when it came out without the period tracking. It was later added, but yeah, it's just one well-known example, but it happens with different products as well. But that they just lack perspective. Now we have these specific FemTech products, great. I wish to see more questions asked about gender and females and female health in other health applications as well, and then consider those data in a gender disintegrated basis to make sure that we address these segments differently. Now we have the capabilities for that, but we have to make sure that those data is actually collected, that we think of it, because data is great, but it's people who think of the products, it's people who use the products. So if the teams, companies, executives are not balanced on a gender level and they're not bringing their balanced perspectives, it's not going to be good data. And what kind of AI algorithms are we going to end up with if data is not carefully considered towards at least half of the population or more than half of the population? So this is what I would like to really see happening, that when we ask questions and we collect data, that the female perspective is added. And I think it can be only ensured if the executives and product developers teams are gender balanced and they bring those perspectives. So when you have female founders, fund them. When you can hire females, then hire them, pay the equal amount. If you can vote for women, then please do vote for women, because women bring female issues to politics and regulation. So it's something that I personally thought has less impact, but actually just being women has impact on our health and our families and the economics as well.
Any more?
Yeah, just on the data question, I think it's really interesting, particularly in the menstrual health space, because we started tracking our periods and really giving a lot of information to apps to be able to tell us what we were doing with our bodies. And at first, I think this was really great, but now because we're giving control to the machine, we're relinquishing the responsibility to actually learn about our bodies. We're saying, okay, machine, you do it for me. You tell me when I can have sex without a condom. You tell me when I'm gonna get my period. You give me those storm clouds so I know when I, should have alone time, whatever the case. And I think that's a little bit dangerous because the machine is not necessarily supposed to stand between us and our bodies and understanding them. And secondly, that data, which is voluntarily input, sometimes gets used against us, as we've seen in the case of Flow, the period tracker in the US, where pretty much like...
Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, because I don't know about what happened.
So there's very few companies in the world that don't sell their data, period tracking apps. Clue is the one that has been outstanding in saying, no, 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 we are never going to sell our users' data, and has always kept the user at the center. I don't know if that's because of German regulations or just because the company is authentic in that way. Whatever the case, it still stands that way. But one of the companies in the US was just like, pretty much as soon as people were putting in data about their bodies, it would be fed to Facebook and then they'd get a skin cream advertisement because they said that their face was oily. So there's a lot of like data, you know, how the data is being used against you, because it's really valuable information. And even in places in the US, I think that they were using that data to understand like more about abortion cases in a particular state. So there's a lot of data concerns there. What I would like to see more of is, instead of so much like feeding the machine with our data, like how can we develop more sensors or like biometric technology that's actually tracking our bodies in real time and giving us information around our sleep patterns or our heart rates or whatever the case. Like there's a innovation called Aura, which is a ring that helps with sleep patterns and helps you understand your sleep and tries to get people you know, more connected to that. And I think that this is where we're going to see a lot more happening, is integrating this into wearables, into other like gadget technology into that.
So there's a danger associated with it. Just kind of depends on how they might follow through with it and how you handle the data.
Yeah, and how it's
Obviously, right?
communicated. I mean, a lot of these things are like these long things, and you're like, oh, accept.
In really tiny print.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You just don't want to read it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other hand, it's like some people don't care. Like when I talk to a few of my American friends, they're like, I got nothing to hide. I just ignore the advertisements. I'm like, okay. And then, you know, German friends are like, absolutely unacceptable.
Well, I feel like I can relate to that exactly because we're both from the northern part of America, and we see a lot of our friends in the community that just frivolously just kind of give their data away or do things. It's just, you're not conscious of it, I think, until you come to a different culture, whereas, like I said, in Germany, we just have different circumstances around, you know, what people want to divulge about themselves or not. And I wanted to continue, Fabiola, I'm not sure in terms of insights to the US market, how much you know, but do you think that gives some FemTech startups more leverage? That they're able to grow bigger and faster because...
Yes, this is the thing. I mean, we read about the US market and look at what FemTech investors are doing there and gender lens investors. I don't know too much about it myself. So yes, I think what we see companies here, and we try to encourage them to think bigger in terms of their business model. And one example is in menopause. We've seen a number of startups here. We're trying to offer. They're saying they want to improve if a woman is not feeling good. You know, you get hormonal yoga, you get exercises, whatever, and then you're going to feel better during these time periods during menopause. You look at the US startups and they pitch it totally different. They say menopause is something that affects everybody, and the way you're going to deal with your menopause is going to affect you 40 years afterwards. And so what we try to, I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but what we try to do is to, when we have founders here and there's similar models in the US, kind of actually look at what they're doing, because as you say, they have a bigger market, they can operate more freely in some respects. So what can they adapt here? I think within Germany, if it's a business model that is purely where revenue is meant to come in the end from data, we are actually careful, because we have seen very few where it's worked, and there too we see some founders who are quite naive in that they're saying, you know, they're going to generate users and traction, and then they're going to be able to sell the data, but they're not even, at least in Germany, for example, if you talk about particular illnesses or something, you need to have a doctor on board who's going to, you need to ask the question in the right way, so the data you're generating are actually relevant for somebody. And so if we see a lot of founders, they're kind of, sometimes we feel not quite thinking it through, so we're trying to challenge them on that, you know, that if it's going to be a data-driven model, make sure that the data are relevant.
And since we do have 2 founders here, and probably also you have a wide network of female founders, because Fabiola being an investor, is there anything that you guys would wish in this landscape, that just something you would wish there would be more understanding of when it comes to finding an investor or an investment at all, or when you guys are pitching your story? Is there something that you feel like is missing in the German ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit about this earlier. I think that there's a lot of emphasis that goes into getting female founders and other founders ready for the pitch, you know, making the pitch perfect, and how to talk to investors and get to know the investors speak. I think there needs to be a lot more emphasis on how we can train investors and educate them about female bodies so that men don't ask questions like, you only use 1 tampon per cycle, right? Like, you know, like there's a ridiculous amount of, like, ridiculous quality and amount of questions that simply come from misinformation. It's not because they're stupid, it's not because they're like, they don't care, it's really because we have not created educational opportunities to connect the dots. So I would say that having more investor training where, you know, accelerator programs are like, hey, we're working with investors to get them to understand what this landscape looks like, rather than us constantly like begging on our knees to try to speak investor speak.
In general, I wish less gender bias in this country and in Europe. As a female entrepreneur, I face it a lot, even with questions. Yeah, well, mostly with questions. I don't understand the questions. So about the cycle, once I was asked, okay, so you're measuring fertility, but what do you measure about that? I was like, yeah, there is nothing to say when it comes. That was one thing, but even from service providers, they just ask question, okay, so you're a woman, female hack, so should I recommend you a female lawyer? It's like, yeah, you can, but why? Numerous things like that, and I started sort of batch myself up and be a little bit more outspoken when these questions come and call these people out on these kind of biases that, no, this question, even your question was gender biased, and no, I don't want this, I want something different, but that's one thing. The other thing is that as a female founder, you have to meet different standards, higher standards, and that's a little bit harder. But you can make them, you can do them. If you have more support from investors, very well educated female investors who understand your body, your life situation, it's going to get easier. But also legislation has to improve to accommodate female founders. So it was just a recent issue that came up in startups, or about startups, that female founder wanted to go on a maternity leave and she had to give up her board seat because of that. I find that it's infuriating. But investors who go to Mutterschutz, they also have to give up their board seats, and it's not sure that they're ever going to get it back. So legislation also has to accommodate the needs of women in leadership position.
Do you feel the same way when it comes to hearing that? I mean, because you've also been on the other side, right?
Yeah.
You've also been here.
I think maybe to kind of get a discussion going, I think that what we feel, I mean, for one, I'm quite positive because I think just what I've observed in the last year, it's a lot of the traditional VCs, they're seeing the need for more diversity. So although we feel that we as also sort of have this advantage of being female investors, increasingly the VCs are hiring women, and quite often they're looking at digital health topics, and so I feel on the whole you will get more understanding on the investor side. There's positive change there, and to open the discussion, I think yes, we see a lot of teams, female founders who are doing FemTech topics and decide not to invest. And I think what I feel, what can improve from an investor perspective, and which is something we are very excited about doing, is helping female founders early on, because quite often and there's a lot of discussion about why that is. They lack the relevant networks, I don't know how, but sometimes at fund, when they found a business, they haven't understood as well as some of the male teams what different types of financing means and what investors are going to expect from them. So it's so what we try to do, and I think that's something that's where we can see immediate. We can help founders. We can really help founders is just explain, for example, if you take in a VC investor, that's going to be different than, for example, a business angel who is often in a way more conservative or is more risk averse. The VC investor, he is going to want to see, or she is going to want to see high traction, exponential growth, expecting the next round next year. So if you want a different setup, talk to different type of investors. So it's I think it's understanding early on what different types of finance mean would help also.
Yeah, education, we all need it.
Well, and I wonder though, does that, because I wonder if that's more of a difference. Do you feel that it's more sex-based? Because you also said you feel like a lot of female founders, that when they come to you, they seem so early stage that you want to help. Is that how I understood it correctly? Like help them educate what kind of financial models there are, and then did I drop the ball now?
Maybe I put it wrongly then. We were excited, why are we excited about female founders? Because we feel we can really help early on. And
Okay,
what we have seen is that sometimes, and especially I think in Berlin, we have this whole startup ecosystem, but once we get outside our bubble, I was talking yesterday to a founder from Baden-Württemberg. She's in the countryside. She's a single mom. She doesn't have the relevant network, and they really make mistakes with regards to future funding, where we can help them with one phone call and just. So it's in a way it's very rewarding, because you can help quite a lot early on without that much effort in a way. So that's what I meant.
Yeah, because I also think gender equality, especially in the financial institutes or when you look at VCs across the board, we're not there yet, right? So the more females or women we have where we can be more empathetic towards one another and help each other, it can just help with the growth. And I think that's experience generally that we're a little far from that still, unfortunately. Again,
From a private point of view, I very much agree with you, and I think in a way, it's also as an investor, the more you spend with the founder and the topic, the more you fall in love with your founder and topic. But as an investor, your role is also you are looking after other people's money. So if you see it's not going well, it's the conflict we then have. That on the one hand, empathy, yes, but on the other hand, it's also your job to challenge the founder and challenge him, and obviously try to support, but also realize when it's not going well, then some sort of decision has to be taken. So.
But from a founder's perspective, would you feel more comfortable approaching, let's say, a female investor versus a male investor?
I mean, we've only had female investors and angels, and like our network is just only ever been women. Like I don't think it's been intentional that way. It's just they believe in what we're doing, and it just hasn't happened yet where we've had to ask for money from men. It just has been this way. And actually, like our model for fundraising for our nonprofit right now is instead of looking for a donor to usually we'll sit in the driver's seat and kind of like your program should be doing this, you guys should be focusing on this. We've taken like a diversified model where we're actually asking for money from each of our like closest partners. So social enterprises that are doing quite well, that have actually like, you know, made a little bit of profits, but asking for little chunks of money from 10 to 15 different sources. And altogether, this actually is like the crowdsourcing model. And this, I think, helps us to show like, hey, we've got them, do you want to join us? And then it's easier for us to talk to when the situation does happen. Men, but no pad or menstrual cup companies are owned by men, to my knowledge yet. They're all female-run businesses.
Okay, that's good news. Heine, do you have a
I have very different experiences. All of our investors are men. I have 0 women, unfortunately. And they're very supportive, so I was lucky to find them. They're very strangely innovative and forward-thinking, I have to say. And on the other hand, in medicine and I work a little bit in pharmaceutical as well. So in pharmaceuticals, I also seen that some of the topics, even female topics, are just being research is being led by men, companies that are targeting female diseases, pregnancies, for God's sake, sometimes have all men teams. So there are those men for sure, and they need the women perspective on female products. So I see it a little bit more diverse or balanced, I have to say. And I find it nice to work with men on these topics, and I wish to see here more men. Kudos to all of you guys who are here tonight. But I think that it's, I know we're half of the population, but we're not gonna get it done alone. We have to have an honest conversation at home with our husbands, with the fathers, with the people who are making the legislation. And we have to have honest conversations in companies as well, maybe women or men. But yeah, we really have to start putting up with each other, I have to say. And I see that happening in my network, in my company, in the projects that I work with. So, and I think it can help the products, the companies to flourish. So, because the men have also great perspectives to bring in. And I honestly love to work with them.
So I think, Fabiola, go ahead.
Yes, maybe I can add to that, because for me it's not so much about men and women, it's about particular type of mindsets. And it's, for example, a male founder who's just raised around, and then he tells his investors that he's now going to go on parental leave. He's going to have the same sort of problem sort of a female founder is going to have. And I think it's a lot, we often mixing up also sort of female issues with the issue of Vereinbarkeit von Familie und Beruf, of family and combining family and work. So, and there's, what we are observing is mind shifts also in men. So that's why as AUXO we've come away from saying we want to invest in female founders only, but what we say is that we are looking for founders with a particular type of DNA, and we haven't found the right wording yet, but progressive DNA, so it's founders who really breathe diversity, and they encourage new work models, and they're purpose-driven, and sort of at the moment we're having lots of fun defining what this progressive DNA actually means. But I think that's what we should support, and not distinguishing between men and women.
Sorry, just please allow me to pick up on one thing you said. You mentioned that you think that male founders are having the same issues when they're going to parental leave after they're having a family. And some research actually shows that once men start to have families, their income raises, and on the other side, women start to have families, of course their income decreases and their salaries decrease regardless of parental leave. So the whole society judges men differently and women and men differently in this parental situation. So this is what numbers and show at the current state.
I know the numbers, and I think it was The Economist who last week came out with scary numbers in a way about the wage gap between women and men with families. I think what I meant was more practical, that you're right, the statistics, but I know a couple of founders who, one for example has a child that's ill, and it's been a discussion with his investors, because he said he has to spend more time at home, and they said if they had known, wouldn't have invested. But just, it's always difficult with individual examples, but it's a kind of, there needs to be, I think there needs to be a change in mindset, and we need to encourage men and women to want to do both in a way.
I think you raise an interesting point around judgment and gender roles. So working in the mental health space, whenever there's a guy who starts an NGO, that distributes sanitary pads, people are like, oh my God, you're such an amazing man, I can't believe you're doing this for these women, and they just get gushed over. And I've observed it many times before, and sometimes I do it myself because the person is very endearing, but I catch myself and realize okay, would this ever happen the other way around? I'm working for a company that does scanning technology on heart disease. Is anyone congratulating me because this is a male-based field? No, and no one ever will. Or the dad that is walking the dog and the kids in the park. Oh, he's such a good dad. And I think that we really hold a double standard, and it's really thank you for all the men that have been here, but thank you for all the women and all the transgender and all the other people, all the people that are here. And I think that I wish that we weren't talking about FemTech tonight. I wish that we were talking about health tech, and I wish that we were talking about different needs within the market that are not being met, because that's really the kind of higher level question here.
Yeah. And I want to leave it on that note before we go to the Q&A, because I think you're absolutely right, and I see this as, like any discussion, it's a stepping stone for us to at least bring out these questions and talk about them, because we can't ignore it, right? We can't ignore that there's still gender, balance issues. There's no equality across the board. We're just not there yet. So first I would like to have a big round of applause for our speakers. Before we go to the Q&A, I again have a really beautiful bit.ly link for you guys on the side where you can give us feedback to our event, because it is super important for us to know what you guys thought, if you enjoyed it, so we can also see you guys next time. We are going to take, let's see how many questions pop up. And that's a good start. That's a good start. And I think we can go down this row. And then we're going to do networking afterwards. So I want to, let's depend on how long the answers go and the discussion. But I'll start with the first person. And where were we? There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us tonight. It was very interesting to hear. I think we heard a lot about the disadvantages to be a female founder or a female investor, but I would like to flip it more to the positive side of the picture, really. And I would like to hear more about when did you feel more powerful as a female compared to your male peers? When did you feel that you had an advantage as being a female on the fields you work at? To maybe just to have a little bit more positive stories.
Should we answer them right away?
Oh yeah, because you can't remember them. Just go ahead, answer them.
I'm so happy you asked that question. Thank you so much. I would say that I have that every month because I'm really attuned to my own menstrual cycle, and I realize when I can perform at my best and when I need just to chill out more. And so because if we're normal menstruating humans, we have a reset button. It makes me feel like I can really optimize my time a lot better, and it actually makes me feel sad for men that they don't have anything to grab onto. Like there's no measurement tool, and in a way I have a theory that they're a little envious that they don't have something to kind of keep them on track. I'm not saying they wish they were bleeding every month, but it's really nice when you actually understand hormones, how like cool estrogen is and how cool progesterone is, and these things that can really like absolutely affect your moods, your sexual desire, your ability to think fast, your ability to be creative. So, yeah.
Yes, maybe I feel it's a very concrete advantage when it's business models that relate to women in terms of understanding your customer, that we understand the stuff a lot quicker than others. And I also think my husband once said to me, he's also a founder, and he said that if founders kind of, they try to know what they're doing, and a big part of when I asked him what's his best and sort of on the investor side, the person does that helps him the most, he said he's helping me stay sane. So whenever I feel the pressure's on, and because exactly you're growing and everything's happening at once, and a big part as an investor is a supporting role. And so I do feel we have a big advantage there, because we somehow, at least I hope, we have these antennas that show us a lot of our job is seeing what the founders are doing. They are the main person we're talking to in the company. So I feel this. We have a very concrete advantage there.
I felt it when building teams, so I could be more, I think, understanding to certain situations than maybe some male counterparts could have been. So I felt some power and some advantage there, definitely, in the operational level.
And maybe one other topic we haven't talked about in talking about female founders, because it's, I don't know why a discussion on FemTech ends sort of in talking about these type of issues, is that if you look at where the areas where the percentage of female founders is proportionally higher, then it's areas like health, education, it's areas that are really important to society. So I think that's part of the big reason why I'm so excited about supporting that, because it's it's things that bring us further, and
So the next question, because you have the mic.
Thank you as well for the debate. So I wanted to ask a bit more about the data point. So do you think that female founders are in a better position to use data collected on women to positively influence products, for example, in pharma? Because I think the birth control is a really good example of how that's not impacted, but how can we ensure that our data is used in a positive way to produce products that are kind of engineered towards our personal needs?
I think it comes down to regulatory mechanisms and who's enforcing them and who's not. And that is like larger governmental structures. So I think that products are better when they're designed by females for females, or by men for men, or by whoever for whoever. But I wouldn't say that because women are more trustworthy. You know, like I know plenty of untrustworthy women. So yeah, I would hesitate against making like generalizations about that, and I think it really comes down to how we regulate where that data is going, and who we're giving it to.
Yeah, who we're giving it to and what for. For example, if you're negotiating a pharma deal, look at you're negotiating on what terms you're giving the data away.
So I don't have exactly a question, I just want to add something to what you said. I really love the session and the insights that you provide. I'm from a healthcare background, and I'm building a startup that focuses on menstrual cycle and correlates with productivity levels. So I don't think the ultimate solution to empower women passes to create, for example, health osteoporosis tracking for women, or the birth control pill. Most of the pills are synthetic, so it doesn't mean if it's weight or not, if it's overweight or not, it's the same. What I wanted to say is, nowadays, in terms of health apps development, we have a really good progress. And I believe the health apps bring tracking and make people, regardless men or women, more aware of their symptoms and on their health is going on. And at the same time, they deliver content. And I really, I put a lot of emphasis in this health education and bring health engagement to people, that regardless of being men or women, I want people to make better decisions on their health. So health education in this case, has a really good progress. I believe it is not the ultimate solution. I think the solution to empower women is to bring more support. I totally agree with Danielle. I think we should change our communication and change this mindset that, educate investors, for example, or even, regardless the menstrual cycle apps. I think, a lot of people have been working on it. I think, it's the same topic, but I think they focus on really like fertility, and, pregnant, how to get pregnant solutions. And I think that nowadays we should empower women. Menstrual cycle should be a tool to use them in their own favor. And, estrogen and progesterone, I totally agree. Women is the only, men don't have this. Their brain changes according to the cycle, the phase that they are. And we should use this, for example, to bring to life and to tell women, this is your gift, not exactly a sentence, or you should not be victimized for this. And at the same time, bring this communication to people that, we should invest more in women, that we should support us having a more support network, bring more guidance nowadays to these female founders.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Trina. Thank you very much. I enjoyed all the comments. I once found digital clinic and academy for women. And the topic is the immune system for women and how the environmental contamination is dealing with us and even does this an effect of fertility. So my question is, because now I'm going to be by this Founders Institute Accelerator program, and we have to deal with a lot of men mentors. So my question is, do you have some tips how to deal when you pitch? What kind of mindset do we have to talk in order to be able to be understandable for men? Really, because it's maybe it's how was your experience? Yes.
So this is sorry for the criticism. What worked for me is always starting from the essential basics, really most essential basics of what it means from that specific perspective, that targeting female users or female questions. That can help, and quantifying everything that it also shows the business potential in this specific area that we are working on. Do you agree?
Yeah, but one of my favorite studies is a study, and I hope I'm not quoting it wrongly, but there's a number of studies, and they looked at they looked at pitches made by men and pitches made at women, where in the end the male teams got more money. And what they found out is that the male teams were asked more opportunity, they called it opportunity focused questions by the investors. It's about the inherent investor bias. So the male teams were asked opportunity-driven questions, and the female teams were asked more risk-based questions. How do you protect your IP or protect yourself from competition or whatever. And then they did the same thing again, but had two male teams, and one of them was asked these opportunity-driven questions, and the other team the risk-driven questions. And then again, the opportunity-driven questions got much more money. So my advice would be to when investors ask you, kind of like a good politician, answer them, but always go towards, talk about the opportunities to see and make it sort of, I don't want to do sort of, it's not, I don't want to say make a male pitch at all, but I think it's about talk about opportunities and get investors to listen to where you perceive those. And
yeah, I was actually just having this conversation today about how to transition like NGO models working around menstrual health into more social enterprise and entrepreneurial mindsets. And those NGO people are really good at defining the problem, really good at saying, oh, these poor women, these poor girls, look what we have to deal with, look what we have to deal with, but they're not so good at identifying opportunity. And this is where business actually wins and the market forces drive the economy and drive actually social change sometimes. So I would definitely echo the opportunity mindset.
All right, and with that being said, also to your last comment, I have to advertise a little bit. We're having our next open lecture, World Changers in Tech event on April 7th, which is the founder, Hans Klappa. He's going to be talking about health and well-being, going from iversity. So he founded iversity, it's an academic platform, and moved into mental health. So that should be very interesting. And if you're part of our newsletter, we do offer very exclusive invite-only events. The next one is March 25th. Tell people that you're going to be there. It's about female entrepreneurship and investors. So in general, though, I'll make sure that we put on more events around these topics and come. Make sure you give us some feedback, what's interesting for you guys, because we're very happy to work together with our community. So that being said, we have drinks and networking afterwards on GERMANTECH, so you guys can join us in the back area of the bar, and another big round of applause to you guys.